In a cinematic showdown that no one saw coming, Disney's $250 million attempt to reimagine the classic fairy tale Snow White crumbled under the weight of its own ambitions, while a scrappy, blocky adaptation of the video game Minecraft danced its way to box office glory. The clash wasn't just a tale of two films, it was a cultural reckoning, a moment that laid bare the growing disconnect between Hollywood's elite and the audiences they claimed to serve. At the heart of this debacle was Rachel Zegler, a talented young actress whose missteps during the Snow White press tour turned her into a lightning rod for criticism. Her dismissive attitude toward the original 1937 animated film, coupled with Disney's apparent determination to overhaul a beloved story, sparked a backlash that snowballed into a full-blown cultural meltdown. Meanwhile, Minecraft, a movie mocked by critics as simplistic and childish, proved that respecting your audience and delivering unpretentious fun can still win the day. This is the story of how Disney's Snow White became a cautionary tale, how Zegler became an unwitting symbol of Hollywood's hubris, and how a pixelated underdog stole the spotlight. Disney has been in a state of creative disarray for years, churning out live-action remakes that feel less like celebrations of their animated classics and more like exercises in corporate soul-searching. The studio that once defined family entertainment with timeless stories and unforgettable characters has struggled to recapture its magic. The Little Mermaid, released in 2023, made a modest splash but failed to achieve the cultural dominance of its 1989 predecessor. Peter Pan and Wendy, a 2023 Disney Plus release, vanished from public consciousness almost as soon as it premiered, drawing tepid reviews and even less audience engagement. These remakes, while visually impressive, often felt burdened by an unspoken need to fix the originals, as if the stories that captivated generations were somehow flawed or outdated. Instead of leaning into the charm and simplicity that made their animated counterparts enduring, Disney's recent efforts have veered into heavy-handed messaging, prioritizing social commentary over storytelling. Enter Snow White, Disney's latest attempt to breathe new life into a foundational piece of its legacy. The 1937 animated film, the studio's first full-length feature, is a cultural touchstone, a delicate blend of romance, adventure, and fairy tale whimsy. Its story of a kind-hearted princess, a dashing prince, and a jealous queen has resonated. For nearly a century, its imagery and music etched into the collective imagination. Reimagining such an iconic tale was always going to be a high-stakes endeavor, but Disney's approach suggested a studio more interested in making a statement than honoring its history. The Snow White remake, directed by Mark Webb and backed by a $250 million budget, promised a modern take on the classic, with Rachel Zegler in the titular role and a script that emphasized empowerment over romance. On paper, it sounded like a bold evolution. In practice, it was a miscalculation of epic proportions. Rachel Zegler, a rising star fresh off her breakout role in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story, seemed like an inspired choice for Snow White. Her vocal talent, charisma, and youthful energy made her a natural fit for a Disney princess. But from the moment the project was announced, Zegler's public comments about the film set off alarm bells among fans. In interviews and social media posts, she didn't just distance herself from the 1937 original, she openly criticized it. She called the classic cartoon weird for its focus on Snow White's love story, mocking the idea of a prince who literally stalks her. She described the original film as extremely dated in its portrayal of women, suggesting that her version of Snow White would be a leader, not a damsel waiting for rescue. "The fairest of them all doesn't mean the whitest or the prettiest," she said in one interview. "It means who's the most just, who can become a fantastic leader." These remarks, delivered with a mix of eye-rolling disdain and self-assured conviction, framed the remake as a corrective to a story Zegler seemed to view as inherently flawed. To be fair, Zegler wasn't entirely wrong to point out the dated elements of the 1937 film. The original Snow White, while groundbreaking for its time, reflects the gender norms of the 1930s, with a passive heroine whose primary goal is to find love and domestic bliss. A modern retelling could have explored new dimensions of the character, her resilience, her compassion, her growth, while preserving the fairy tale magic that made the story timeless. But Zegler's approach wasn't about updating the story, it was about dismantling it. She hinted that the prince might be cut from the film entirely, dismissed the romantic elements as irrelevant, and framed her Snow White as a proto-feminist. icon who needed to learn lessons about coming into her own power before ruling a kingdom. This wasn't a reinterpretation. It was a rejection of everything that made Snow White. Well, Snow White. The press tour for the film became a masterclass in self-sabotage. Zegler's comments grew increasingly combative, as if she were daring fans to disagree with her vision. When asked about the backlash from fans who cherished the original, she doubled down, saying she didn't need the approval of people who cling to nostalgia. She positioned herself as a reformer, fixing a story that she believed had no place in 2025. The problem wasn't just her opinions, it was the tone. Condescending, dismissive, and utterly disconnected from the audience she was supposed to charm. She treated the role of Snow White like a platform for a TED Talk, not a chance to embody a beloved character. Fans who had grown up with the animated classic felt alienated, confused by why someone who seemed to loathe the source material was starring in its remake. It was as if Zegler had signed on to play Wonder Woman and spent every interview complaining about comic books. Disney, for its part, did little to rein in the controversy. The studio's marketing campaign leaned heavily into the modernized angle, emphasizing Snow White's strength and independence, while downplaying the fairy tale elements that defined the original. Trailers showcased sweeping visuals and a diverse cast, but they also hinted at a story that bore little resemblance to the 1937 classic. The dwarfs, reimagined as a mix of human and CGI characters, were presented as quirky sidekicks rather than the heartwarming ensemble of the original. The evil queen, played by Gal Gadot, was given a beefed-up backstory that framed her villainy as a response to patriarchal oppression. Even the iconic apple scene was reworked into a metaphor for toxic ambition, according to leaked script. Details. The film felt less like a love letter to Snow White and more like a corporate checklist, ticking off boxes for diversity, empowerment, and relevance while ignoring the story's emotional core. The backlash was swift and unrelenting. On social media platforms like X, fans voiced their frustration, accusing Disney of betraying its legacy and Zegler of disrespecting a cultural treasure. Hashtags like "Not My Snow White" trended for weeks, accompanied by memes that juxtaposed Zegler's quotes with clips from the 1937 film. The controversy reached a fever pitch when South Park aired its Into the Pandiverse special, a biting satire that took aim at Disney's remake obsession. In the episode, the show's characters confront a dystopian world where every classic story has been reimagined with forced diversity and heavy-handed messaging. The villain, a multiverse-hopping AI modeled on Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy, systematically replaces beloved characters with versions that check corporate boxes but lack soul. While Disney wasn't named directly, the parallels were unmistakable. Snow White, The Little Mermaid, Star Wars, Marvel, every franchise that had been rebranded with a woke veneer was skewered. Zegler, though not mentioned by name, was the unspoken target, her press tour attitude perfectly encapsulated in the show's portrayal of smug, self-righteous reboots. As the release date approached, Disney scrambled to salvage the film. Reports surfaced of extensive reshoots, with rumors that the studio had reinstated the prince and added a romantic subplot in response to the backlash. But the damage was done. Snow White opened to a disappointing $40 million domestically, a far cry from the blockbuster numbers Disney had hoped for. Critics were divided, with some praising the film's visuals and Gadot's performance, but others calling it a joyless slog that failed to capture the original's charm. Audiences were even less kind, with the film earning a C+ cinema score and lackluster word of mouth. By its third week, Snow White had limped to a global total of $160 million, a respectable figure for most films, but a disaster for a $250 million tentpole with a marketing budget to match. Then came the TikTok that sealed Zegler's fate. In an attempt to drum up buzz, she posted a video of herself and a small group of friends attending a nearly empty screening of Snow White. Holding a bouquet of flowers and grinning for the camera, she asked the ticket seller for 2 tickets, please, only for the employee to ask, for which movie? The moment, meant to be a playful flex, backfired spectacularly. The empty theater, the confused ticket seller, the forced cheer. It was a cringe-inducing snapshot of a film that no one wanted to see. Commenters on X pounced, turning the video into a meme that spread like wildfire. Rachel Zegler throwing herself a Snow White premiere in an empty theater is peak 2025, one user wrote. Another quipped, she could have bought the whole theater and still had room for a TED Talk.